Hello, welcome back. We're Harry and Ethan, and we're going to be talking about The Sopranos.
We're your hosts.
What?
We're your hosts.
We're your hosts, yeah. It's getting close to the end of the show, isn't it, Harry?
It is. My favourite thing is the fact that when we were doing The Sopranos, we ended up just talking about The Wire. And now we started doing podcasts on The Wire. We've immediately gone back to The Sopranos.
Yeah. So, I've watched Series 5. I finished it a couple of days ago. So I've only got the one season left, to go 20 episodes of the show before it's over. I was misled about this season, Harry. I was expecting the worst of the worst, maybe not the worst of the worst, but I was expecting something definitely of a lower quality and standard to the rest of the show, going by what you told me about it being a stepping stone between season 4, which you really liked, and season 6, which is the finale of the show, so it's obviously going to be one of the big highlights. But I really enjoyed it. I did. I won't lie, part of it was because I did have a kind of a big break of about maybe 2, possibly 3 months. I don't think it was 3, I think it was around 2 months, where I finished the 4th series, and I decided to have a break basically, because I started the 5th series I think the next day, and there were a couple of things that happened in the first episode back that pretty much just made me go, I don't want to spend time with these people anymore. I'm going to have a break. I'll finish it around Christmas. And I didn't end up doing that. I ended up starting it back up again sooner than I thought I would. Just because I went back home and, me and my dad watched it together, so it seemed like a good time to start it up again. But I'm really glad that I made that wait, actually, because I rewatched the first episode of the 5th series that I'd already seen, and my opinion of it and the way that I experienced the episode had changed completely. I think I really did press the reset button, having a couple of months in between to kind of basically to just have some relief from these characters, because they are pretty bad, and most of them are very, very terrible. And I think it was one particular moment in the first episode back that made me just basically say, fuck these guys. I'm taking a break. I can't stand them anymore. And it was when Christopher and Paulie kill a waiter, who was pretty much innocent, basically did nothing wrong, and he lost his life for it. And I kind of just said that this was the moment where I was going to have to take a break, because I already felt Series 4, me starting to lose interest in it for the same kind of reasons. And Series 5 was just the lowest of the low, so I basically told myself it has to stop now. I'm going to take a break.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that I wasn't maybe the biggest fan is because you come straight off of season 4. I think it's the start of season 5. I think it's got that weird new colour palette. I can only assume they've gone from film to digital, and it just doesn't look as good. Like the colour correction's not as good. There's something washed out and kind of dull about it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have Tony and Carmela kind of buzzing off each other anymore. You've kind of lost that. I think Tony's in a kind of shit place. He's living in a very depressing home. Colour palette's depressing. The storyline with him and Melfi in the first few episodes I really wasn't a big fan of. And you've got a bunch of these new characters that are kind of being thrown into the mix, which is done in kind of quite a clunky way in episode 1. And then I felt like it was just suddenly, I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah. I can forgive it for the way that it introduced Feach Lamana and Phil Leotardo, because they're characters that when they introduce them, it feels like they're far removed enough from Tony's life that it would make sense he hasn't mentioned them until this point, until they've just been released. But Tony Blundetto really is the red herring, isn't he? He's the one who's kind of like, how have we not mentioned this character before? He's your cousin. We've had 4 whole seasons of this show, and this person has never come up in a single conversation. He pretty much did just get invented on the fly. And you often joke that Steve Buscemi just kind of wanted to be in the show, so they basically wrote him into it. And I don't know if that's actually how it happened.
Wanted to be in the show, but he was like, I want to be Tony. You're gonna be Tony. I want to be just as good as. But yeah, so I wasn't the biggest fan of it looking back, because I think season 6 has such an explosive and interesting start, and it's got like the perk of being the final season, but it's 2 seasons kind of packaged together to kind of almost tell like a cohesive story in themselves. And I think season 4 had such a brilliant kind of finale. Season 5 just kind of got left out, but then again, it's been months since I saw the entire season when I first watched the show, and you came back and I watched the last 4 episodes with you, and I have to say, those 4 episodes, I mean, they're all fantastic episodes. I loved all of them more than the first time I watched them, and I'd say Long-Term Parking is probably like my second or third favourite episode of the show now. I thought it was just phenomenal.
That's the penultimate episode.
Yeah, I thought watching them with you, like, okay, maybe season 5 is better than I give it credit for. Because in my head it was always, I don't like what they do with the Blundetto story. I think that's a wasted opportunity. But I think the Adriana storyline is like one of the best in the show. So season 5 has these they're the 2 main stories, and I think you got some of the best and worst of the Sopranos in that.
Yeah, it kind of mirrors the second season in a way, doesn't it? Because the penultimate episode, you have the characters that you really care about and are emotionally invested in, and they get killed off, and it's really, really not fair. And then in the following episode, you have a character getting killed off, and
it's kind of the other way around.
I mean, yeah, it is the other way around, because in the second series, it's Richie and then Sal, and this is Adriana and Blundetto. But it still has that really cool kind of 2 sides of the same story thing going, I think, where Tony is caught between having to come to a major decision between 2 people in his life that he actually does care about. I know he was never really too keen on Richie in the first place, so I think he was quite happy with that, with the way that it kind of got resolved, and he didn't really have to be involved with it in the second series. It was incidental, but I like the way that it's kind of mirrored that, actually, because I feel like with The Sopranos, what you'll often have is you'll have the penultimate episode will be a banger, and then like shit will go down, and then in the finale it will be kind of the aftermath and having to deal with it. And then the alternative is you kill off a big character in the second last episode, and then kill off a completely different character in the final episode, and they're both quite far apart in extremities. Even if in one case it will be 2 people in the mob, and in the other it will be 1 person in the mob and 1 person quite far removed, but she still has to suffer for being in some way indirectly related to it, which is a shame. I think I agree that the first half is weaker than the second half of the season. Not that I think the first half is bad by any means. I think it has a couple of strong episodes. So the one with Adriana, Tony, and Christopher, where it kind of gets to a boiling point between those 3, because of the stuff that Christopher is hearing about, kind of rumours between Tony and Adriana what they've been getting up to, and it all culminates at the end of that episode when he beats her up. The way that episode is written and done is really good, because I feel like all of the episode has kind of the season has taken a back seat for a second, and it's pretty much just said, we're going to leave the mob stuff for one side here, and we're just going to take these 3 principal characters and show the dynamic between them and how it changes over the course of an hour. And I really like those episodes.
I think it does a good job of like tying it in like at the end, because obviously all of that relationship stuff with Tony and Christopher, and then Adriana and Christopher, ends up becoming really big by the end, when there's like a tipping point when Adriana tells Christopher that she's an informant, and you're left unsure as to what's going to happen, if Christopher's going to kill her, if he's going to go off with her, if she's going to get killed by someone else. You don't really know what's good. And I guess I think they do a pretty good job of that episode and a few other ones in the season of like driving enough of a wedge between Christopher and Tony, and then Tony B's relationship being added in there as well. That when you get to that point, you're not like 1,000% sure, oh, this is going to happen right now. It kind of murkies it's not what is it? Muddles the relationships up enough that you're kind of unsure as to the fate of it.
That's true, but we did have a conversation about it, and we did say that 2 seasons before Adriana dies, we could see a death coming. I think that was always something that was probably going to happen. We can always hope, of course, but I think that it was cemented before it even happened, pretty much just being involved. I knew that Christopher would have some kind of role related to it. So even in that one really good scene where he's looking over at that family guy coming out of a diner, and you kind of split and you're unsure what's going to happen, I think deep down secretly I could still think, well, The Sopranos is a show that has a profound sense of injustice. The characters that you like the most, the ones who you really feel for, the ones who get the bad endings, whereas the ones who really deserve to go are the ones that carry on moving forward. So I mean, Adriana, she was always going to have to go, but it really is a shame. I mean, the FBI are the most toxic organisation when it comes to the mafia. Any involvement with them, you're gone. It's kind of like Marlowe in season 4 of The Wire, isn't it? If one of his boys gets seen talking to the cops, that's it. They've got to go because they're just a flight risk at that point.
I think in that episode you get like an insight wire-esque into like the mishandling of Adriana's case by the FBI.
100%.
And I feel like you get a little bit of that kind of systemic critique.
The thing that I like about that is that you get a really, really good scene where Adriana's gone missing. No one knows what's happened to her, and they all assume that she's well, the way that they talk to each other is, she could be halfway to China now. She could be fleeing. Well, it's quite clear from the writing, from the performance, that you can see all those agents. They don't want to admit it, but they kind of know she's dead. With the long pauses and the long silences when they're in their offices talking. And yeah, it's really sad because you're right, they completely mishandled it. They didn't know what they were getting into. The second Adriana mentions that she's going to talk to Christopher about it, I just closed my eyes and shook my head because I knew that was going to be what sealed her fate. Because I know she loved him a lot, but I just wouldn't trust Christopher in that kind of decision at all to do, I guess, the quote-unquote right thing, depending on what side of the organisation you're on.
Can I talk about that Tony Blundetto episode?
Yeah,
that one episode. God. So Tony Blundetto, he comes into the show in a kind of clunky-ish way, but obviously it's played very well because Gandolfini and Buscemi are great actors.
Yeah, they have a really good chemistry, and you can believe that they had some kind of history. I'll admit as well that even though they do write him in completely out of nowhere, obviously I knew he was going to be in the show. Of course, you talked to me before I'd watched the season, so I knew it was going to be clunky. But I will admit, actually, the episode where he actually does come on screen, I think they do a really good job making it feel like it's all on a whim, if that makes sense. When I see the scene when they have the party, when he comes back, and the way that everyone acts around it, the performances of the actors do carry it off. Like, yeah, this guy has actually been there since the beginning, but you just haven't seen him yet because he's been in prison the whole time. So credit where credit's due. I think the actors do a really good job carrying it off, like you say.
In those first few episodes, I think he's a very good character. He's not overused. He just kind of wants to be a masseuse. I kind of like him that he is kind of like a joker. You know, that's kind of the role he plays. I feel like. And then you have that one episode where he starts off pretty much at the bottom and then gets given this kind of opportunity to have a business. Things are going well for him, you know. And then he finds that money, so things are going even better for him. And then and then he loses all that money, and then the opportunity goes because he attacks the business owner, and then he's suddenly available to do mob work. It's such a wasted opportunity because I feel like I know how TV works. He couldn't have been he had to be a season 5 character because obviously when they decided to make the season, they kind of brought him in. But I just feel like season 4, Ralph dies. You have an episode after Ralph dies, and then Tony B gets released, and you just start that plot line earlier. You have the episodes where he's in masseuse and he's getting his chance to have a business, and that's how season 4 ends. Mm-hmm. And then season 5, you have it go to shit over the course of like 2 episodes, and then his turn to crime.
Yeah,
it felt so rushed. And it was such a way. Like I liked the direction the character was going, and it just felt like the writers were like, oh, we've got him doing a hit in 2 episodes. You have to really quickly write a reason for him to do it. And I just felt like it was such kind of a waste of that character.
I could almost forgive it though because you're right. What they do with him at the start, forgetting the fact that they introduce him just on a dime, pretty much out of nowhere. The way they build this character is someone who's basically like Catty from The Wire, where he's been released from prison, so he's an ex-con. But he doesn't want to be in the game anymore. He just wants to kind of.
So much better.
I mean, Catty is so much better. Yeah, but Tony, like you say, he wants to be in the masseuse. He's got his own thing started up. He's very, very much doing everything he can to stay away from the family. So that stuff's really good. And then you have that bad episode, like you said, and in that turn when he kills Phil Leotardo's
brother.
Yeah, brother. From that point onwards, I think they do a really good job with him again. The scene where he actually does die is well done. I remember it's a bit wasted actually. I think because what I think the way round they really should have done it was Adriana dies after him. I think because you come off the back of a really emotional episode where this character that you come to be invested in for 5 entire seasons at that point, like the most kind, most most fantastic person in the entire show for just how sweet she is, dies. And there's this one character who dies straight afterwards, but because you've only been around him for a season and his whole arc has felt quite rushed, you don't have that quite the same hit. So I think season 2 manages a lot better, where they have the shocking death happen first, and then the one that actually does hit afterwards. I think the way those two are balanced is a lot more effective.
Yeah, I think it does a pretty good job though. It knows that the audience are so emotionally invested in Adriana I hope so, that her death should make you kind of really like despise all the characters and not be on their side. And I think the finale does a smart thing where it's more about the business side of things. He is killing a family member, which is he saw Adriana's death, like he oversaw that. But he literally by his own hand killed his cousin who he grew up with, which should be more emotional. But it's almost handled in this kind of like it's handled in a more business-like way. Like every kind of choice in that episode, the good thing about rewatching it is I'm not thinking about a plot. I'm trying to kind of work out more thematic stuff. Is every interaction in that episode is kind of what kind of leader he's going to be. You know, he talks to Syl in a great scene. He goes to that dinner.
That's right. You get to see Paulie as well. We don't get to hear his side of things.
Yeah, and he sees almost the way Paulie's presented him as this like leader. And he kind of
this heroic guy.
Close up on the sword, and then it just cuts him. I feel like they kind of have it in that kind of business-like way because the killing is business related. You know, it's to do with business stuff. I feel like it kind of gets away with it. Because I don't know, I feel like if it had been a really emotional episode and Tony was like crying as he was holding Tony B in his arms or whatever, and it tried to go for that, it knows the audience just wouldn't be on his side because of the Adriana thing. So I felt like that almost detached nature of it kind of worked a bit better. But that might just be me.
Yeah, maybe. I know when I watch the scene happen, when Tony Blundetto, the music's playing, so it's got kind of a nice happy, upbeat feel to it as he's pulling into his house out in the country. He walks up the stairs and Tony just comes out from behind the corner and just shoots him with a shotgun shell. It's quite. I mean, I gasped when I watched the scene, so it definitely took me by surprise. I didn't see it coming. But within a couple of scenes later, I just thought, oh, okay, well, Blundetto's dead. But it's not really sad. I think a part of it is to do with the fact that the way that they establish his motivation for his point of no return when it comes to how the mafia feel about him, how Johnny Sacks feels about him, it's not, you don't really see the relationship he has with his cellmate, the one who also got released. So when you find out, oh, okay, you killed Billy Leotardo because Phil and Billy were responsible for the death of Angie, I think his name was. And he was really close to Angie, and you know that. And you hear characters talk all the time about how he was close to Angie. But I don't think I ever saw Tony talk to this guy Angie over the course of the entire season. So all that we're going off of, the way that they build to that moment, the way that kind of the sides slowly picking off each other one by one. When it gets to Tony Blundetto's death, leading up to it, it doesn't feel like there's not a moment where I go, okay, well, I'm definitely on Tony B's side here because I've seen the relationship he has with this guy. They're clearly close-knit and really tight. So obviously you would have this reaction to this character being killed, but you don't get that. It's kind of rushed like a lot of this stuff. Problem is, you got Steve Buscemi, who's a great actor, but you try and congest this entire season, this entire character development, this entire arc in the course of one season to introducing him, with all the backstory that he has with Tony, which is a massive part of the season as well, their relationship before the show even began, how he kind of stops wanting to kind of lead a more straight-edged life, eventually to his demise. It's all tried to do over the space of 13 episodes. And 13 episodes is quite a lot of time, I'll admit that. But when you've got so many other things happening as well, like you said with Adriana and all these other plot elements, it's hard to find time to develop those story beats, the one that really matters, in ways that work. So when he dies, it is shocking because it took me by surprise. But overall, it didn't have the same weight that Adriana's death had, because, like I said, Adriana's been around since the beginning, and she's also just had a really shit season where it felt like it was constantly getting worse and worse for her. I mean, apart from the fact that Christopher's just a terrible guy to live with, because he's a really horrible boyfriend at times, the way he verbally and physically abuses her. The fact that she's developed some kind of illness as well, so she goes to the doctor every few episodes. The fact that she's an FBI informant, all these things, and then she gets involved with a murder as well that wasn't really her fault, but she was involved, and all these things, and it just climaxes with her death. And you look back and you think, fuck, this character, she had such a rough time this last season, and you really wanted her to get out. And Blundetto was kind of wasted. Yeah.
Tony B.
Tony B.
Do you know what else I don't like about season 5? Going to negatives is AJ Soprano, who I think when we did the seasons kind of 3 and 4 podcasts, you're like, I think you might even know. I don't know why people don't like AJ. I'm like, it's because they decide in season 5, maybe because his parents are split. Maybe because he's a teenager, he just becomes the worst guy. I think the first half of season 5 and the first half of season 6, AJ for some reason is just so insufferable. Like I don't know why it's those 2 time frames in particular. He's so irrationally horrible to Carmela. I feel like.
I don't think it's justified in the way that he shouldn't treat his mum the way that he does. I'm completely with you on that. But I think it is explicable. I mean, like you say, he is now going through the latter stages of puberty, so it makes sense that he would act up more and more. And I guess it's his way of dealing with the fact that his parents got divorced, and being raised by the father that he had, he's probably inclined to think that it's the woman who's the one who's in the wrong, basically. So that's why he acts out against Carmelo in the way that he does. Whereas with Tony Soprano, they still get along just fine, even though he's so much more in the wrong. It's unbelievable. It's just unfair. That's just a lot of the Sopranos. Just really unfair things happening that make you go, no, fuck.
I mean, I like the Carmela stuff with the teacher from LA Confidential, but I think it takes kind of the point around the dream episode when the things start to kind of return to they start to kind of almost get together again. That's when I start watching it. That's when I really start to like the season again. But just this, I don't know. I just felt like there's episodes where they're apart. It's so much more miserable. I just didn't, and maybe I needed to just take a break like you did. I just didn't enjoy that bit of season 5 as much. And it's good that they're back together though, because you got season 6 now. With scenes of Tony and Carmela, he's going to come get some food out of the kitchen, we're going to talk about their kids.
It is good they're back together, because it means that they'll have more good scenes together. But I really don't like that she gets back together with him. I almost couldn't believe it, because Tony's been such a hard person to get divorced to the entire season. And the way it resolves is that she just gives him a second chance after all they've been through together. And I like the fact that she broke up with him. I like the fact that they separated and that she tried to go her own way and manage things the way that she does independently from him. Of course, she still gets money from him, and she still has a son that they share that she has to look after. But I don't like the way it's resolved. I always hope that in series 6, Tony does something even worse than he has done through the course of their relationship that causes Carmela to leave him, because then that would be the satisfying end to that relationship. Because I just don't think that she deserves it.
I think it's interesting that she has that kind of thing with the teacher that goes bad, and I guess through that she kind of comes to peace with the weird transactional relationship she has with Tony, where she'll get back together with him, but she needs kind of the independence that she was trying to get in kind of season 4. She almost kind of gets that through separating from him, so they kind of find something that they can work through together, Yeah. And then I guess by the end of season 5, their scenes together are all kind of quite happy, apart from the fact that they fucking killed Adriana. Because I guess that's the final scene of the season, right? Is them kind of in the woods together.
Yeah. Wait,
no, episode. No, it's
yeah,
not. It's the final.
The final scene is fantastic. It is a great way to end the season. because there's something kind of happy about it. And we talked about this as well yesterday. I like that. I still don't think it's fair one bit, but I like that the rewards that Tony gets for killing off Adriana or having Adriana killed is that the FBI are a step behind now on their turf. But because there's this other informant who's kind of on the New York side of things that they introduced early on, and he rats out Johnny Sacks, and now they've got him, and they have 18 years worth of information and evidence to put people away. Is really, really cool because Tony's he's frantic and he's panicked in that moment when the FBI storm Johnny Sacks' house. As he gets away, he calls up his lawyer and says, what's going on? And his lawyer says, oh, no, you're okay. Don't worry about it. They had this informant who had a lot of stuff on Johnny Sacks. You're completely untouchable. And Tony kind of walks away. And it is kind of a silver lining to the fact that Adriana isn't there anymore to do anything. Tony's kind of safe.
I think it's a fun mirroring of the first episode as well, when Tony's kind of lost the house almost, and then there's this wild animal, this giant bear kind of roaming around, and he can't really be there to help, and he can't kind of impose this kind of, I guess, masculine kind of dominance of the household, and he has someone come over and try and help, but even then Carmela's kind of resistant to that. And then you have the final scene of the season where there's like rustling in the bushes, and instead of the bear, it is Tony kind of emerging and returning into the house. I quite like that kind of part that he goes on. Maybe season 5 is good. I mean, you got the dream episode we haven't even talked about.
Yeah, the dream episode's probably it probably is my favourite of the season. It just flew straight by. I would have happily watched another 40 minutes inside Tony's kind of subconscious to see what was on his mind, because I always think the dream concept of the show is fantastic, not only just because it's just an extra layer to a character who's already extremely well written and well acted, but I think I think those dream sequences are always really well shot, and they're really interesting, and they're always very surreal and weird, and have a very bizarre atmosphere, and I like that the show takes that risk. A show that is mainstream as The Sopranos takes the risk to have an entire 40-minute episode that has real stuff happening in it, as in stuff happening in the real world, but almost all the content is just happening inside of his head, and then that's the episode, and you have to wait a week before seeing the continuation of the story. I'm really glad that it takes that risk, and I think it pays off. As we were talking about the episode after we watched it together, I mentioned the fact that it was hard for me to distinguish what was real and what was fake. More the fact that when he was dreaming, I could obviously tell that he was dreaming just because stuff was happening on the screen that would not happen in the real world, full stop. But even the parts where he wasn't dreaming, there was still something off about it. There was still something strange about it. It's the fact that the silences were long and he was by himself, and they would be kind of drawn out moments where nothing is really happening, and it just has this very detached feel to it that I think really, really works, because it means that there isn't a massive tonal shift between the stuff that's in his head and the stuff that's happening in the real world. It all kind of feels like it's happening on a similar wavelength, and it really takes you all the way through those 40 minutes quite well.
I think it does a good job of, like, it starts off and you understand Tony's going to spend the night in a hotel, and he has that conversation with Blundetto, and you kind of understand the stakes that Blundetto might do this thing. But since the second he arrives at the hotel, it's kind of surreal. Like, he sees Melfi, but then doesn't really acknowledge it. He's called a different name. He's put under a different name. I think everyone's got religious names at the hotel. Like, the guy he has to call for is called, like, Jesus. The entire, obviously, like, the long silences, and then the dream starts having him just awaking in the hotel, and that kind of, like, puts you on the back foot. I really like some of the things they do in the dream. It's like the season 2 finale where Tony knows things, or he's dreading things, and he kind of needs his subconscious to tell him, but he does want to repair his relationship with Carmela. He doesn't want to go out with Charmaine Bucco, which is his obsession at that point. That Tony B he needs to kill him because he's going to do this, and you have it kind of culminates with a coach dream. Got the great bit where he's on his horse bringing his horse in the house. But I think it's like you said, it's really creative. It's weird that it just becomes Twin Peaks for like one episode.
I also really like how fan service it is. Brings every character who's died back, apart from maybe Jackie Jr. Just in this one, in this one episode, you see a lot of the characters that Tony's wronged, that he probably feels some sense of guilt for, but he's kind of repressed quite a lot, and it all comes out in this one dream sequence. It's really, really brilliant. But it's the kind of episode I would love to go back and never watch The Sopranos test dream video explained on YouTube or something like that, because I would always love to go back and just feel lost in this one episode where not everything is exactly clear, and everything I feel you could have some meaning from, some interpretation, some explanation that's logical for why he is thinking about this right now, why he goes to a therapy session, and instead of Melfi being there, it's that woman who committed suicide a couple of seasons ago, why he's in a car and Ralph's in the front seat and he looks to his left and Artie's there. And all these kind of skits and very, very short sketch-like scenes happening one after the other. It would be really great to just be going through those all again and remember all of the remember how far Tony's come over the course of the show, all these characters that he's run into, that he's spent time with, that he's eventually gone to, in almost every way, fuck over pretty much. I'm sure every character in that test dream that he knew that had died, he was in some way related to their death. Apart from maybe Richie, just because that was completely Janice. But you could definitely make an argument for him being slightly responsible for that woman's death. I still can't remember her name. I'm pretty sure she's called Linda or something like that. There's obviously Ralph, 100%.
Mikey, was that like the guy from season 1?
Mikey, yeah, that's right, and Sal too as well. So I really think this stuff plays quite heavily on his mind. And that's the other thing. I think an episode like Test Dream is so important to remind you just how much of a human this character is. Because it's very easy to watch a lot of the Sopranos in one go and think, this guy isn't even human anymore. He's just become... How could he possibly make these decisions? How can he live with some of the mistakes that he's made? And these episodes serve to remind you that actually he's good at repressing things, and he can compartmentalize things, but it's not like he'll do something really awful and then he'll just be able to switch it off and it'll just be something that's now completely in the past. It always stays with him. I think the things that he's done are always present, and he just has to kind of live with them and cope with them the best way that he can. I mean, isn't that the premise of the show, pretty much?
Yeah, I mean, they have a point where, I mean, he has a lot of panic attacks. You know, he like really struggles with the whole Tony B situation. Mm-hmm. It's not like he has so many problems. It almost kind of makes you empathise with him in that way. But yeah, like spending an entire episode inside someone's head is one way of kind of proving to you their humanity. I guess. So, I think with the Sopranos dreams, you kind of got three. You got a lot of Sopranos dreams, but you've kind of got the three like big long dreams. And you've got Funhouse.
That's the Sal one.
Yeah, which is an episode that the first half of an episode is a dream. And that's pretty much of the long ones. That's pretty my least favorite. And then you've got this one, the test dream, which is like the majority of an episode is one. And then you have a season 6 dream kind of thingy. Which I think is my favourite. I feel like they get more abstract as they go along. I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Okay.
I think they improve every time in terms of kind of. I guess this one is probably the most surreal, you could say. And it's audacious being an entire episode. But yeah, I think I can't wait to conclude this kind of talk about the Sopranos dreams.
Yeah. Does Series 6 have any episodes that are as long as White Peaks? Or are they all 50 minutes again?
I don't think it does.
Okay, alright. It's interesting that they would only have one finale like that. That's just quite a bit longer than any of the other episodes.
It is weird. I don't know what the deal with that was.
I'm trying to wonder what else there is from Series 5 to talk about.
There's
I guess there's
Junior.
particular episodes as well. Oh yeah, and we got to talk about Feach Lamana, the best character that they introduced as well. It's not even about Tony B. It's about Feach. Yeah, I do like that they introduce 3 characters in one They don't really introduce 3 characters in one episode because you don't all see them in the first episode. But it's made clear to you from the start that these 3 guys are all going to be released from prison, pretty much one after the next. And I actually do quite like that because that's something that you told me quite a long time ago, among other things, that made me excited to watch this season to see what it was like. Because when I hear 3 old mafia people being released back into the world, reintegrated into the organisation again, that to me says, okay, we're going to have 3 spanner in the works, basically. There's going to be 3 more elements that are now going to upset the status quo. That's exactly what it was.
That's Frank Vincent, and Steve Buscemi are 2 of them. You're in for a treat.
Yeah, definitely do. And I think, we talked about Tony Blundetto, but I still think that Blundetto, Phil Leotardo, and Feach as well. I know Feach is a bit of a meme because he's not really important, but he's still around at the start. I think all 3 of them are definitely pretty much as good as you can get for 3 characters to come along and basically fuck around with things a little bit, and they definitely do that, which I'm glad they delivered on that promise.
It sets up the kind of war with New York, or not war, but feud between New Jersey and New York. It was kind of foreshadowed at the end of season 4.
Yeah,
it
does.
And then I guess season 5, you've got the kind of feud between Carmine Jr.
The way that they introduced little Carmine is exactly along the same lines as what you would have wanted with Blundetto, right?
Yeah.
Where he's a character in an earlier season towards the end that they introduce, and you kind of feel like this guy, he will probably become important, but right now he's not really like a big character at the moment. So it's because I think it's good to introduce him earlier on than the start of the 5th series. Because if you just had all of these new characters come out of nowhere at the 5th series, it would start to feel like it was too much.
I think the Sopranos is really good for doing that. We're having characters in backgrounds of scenes that end up being major players.
Yeah, I know Vito's one.
Keep talking about Vito,
Yeah.
You gotta kill Jackie Jr. He's got a few interesting developments in season 5. That's a bit of a Bill Rawls moment. But he just gets better and better. And by the time of season 6, I don't know what episode, but you'll be watching an episode midway through season 6, and you'll be like, I think Vito's my favourite character.
Yeah, I really, really can't wait to see what that's like, because, like I said, I do want to like this character, even though I find it hard to forgive him for Jackie Jr.
It's on Ralph.
I know it's on Ralph, but Vito could have still said, no, I won't do that, find someone else to shoot this guy.
Okay, so Junior, we haven't talked about him.
Oh yeah, Junior.
It's that one episode, I guess.
He has one really good episode. No, in fact, he has 2 really good episodes.
Oh yeah.
And then we don't see him again for ages. It's almost like the show forgets that he's in it. And we've talked about this a little bit outside of the podcast. But I think that peak Junior for me was at the start of the show in the first series, where he was actually a credible threat to what was going on in terms of the conflict of what Tony had to deal with. And as the show goes on, he's like a gag that they cut to when they want something funny, and they often are very funny. But I feel sorry for the actor who plays him, because he will never be as important or as relevant to the Sopranos as he was in the first series, where he actually had a major role in what was going on. Now he's just some old guy that kind of sits around in a house. You sometimes see him with Bobby, but he's not really. He doesn't really have a stake in the show as much as he did in the first series, and I feel sorry for the actor and the character as well. And I feel even more sorry because of what's going on now.
I like how season 5 kind of starts with, because his trials ended, right? So he's almost going to be like the boss alongside Tony, and Tony thinks he's just kind of undermining him and trying to piss him off, and doesn't realise until he kind of goes missing that he's actually kind of got dementia.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good episode. And then you've got the plot line where he keeps trying to go to people's funerals to get out, which you think is like a classic Junior scheme, which I think is the B plot of the episode where Tony meets his mother's mistress, which is also a really good plot line. And then it ends with the scene where Junior breaks down at the funeral because it's all like too much for him.
Although I thought you weren't a massive fan of that episode, or there was something to do with the setting and locations that you didn't think were very interesting.
I think it's just, again, it's like the colour palette. And Tony's like quite depressed in that episode. And the whole like mood of season 5 of The Sopranos is very like mellow and kind of sad. I feel like. I feel like that episode in particular was kind of a depressing one to watch. But
Yeah.
I think the Junior plotline is very fun.
I remember the final scene. I went back actually. I rewatched a few times because I really like how the episode ends. I don't know if you remember, but it ends in at the strip club where they're all around a table and Tony's talking a bit about her. But he leaves out key details and he pretty much just says things like, "You should have seen this woman in my prime. She was gorgeous. Yeah, she went out with JFK. She was at the White House when Jackie was away, and stuff like that." And everyone's like, "Yeah, that's great." And they kind of like he sort of boasts about it. But the way that the camera lingers on him just before the camera ends, there's almost like looks like there's tunnel vision in his eyes. I don't know if you remember, because the camera starts to slowly zoom in on him as he takes a puff of his cigar, he drinks a little bit, and he's kind of nodding his head along with the music. I'll show it to you when we finish recording here. But it's just really good. I just like the way that the camera lingers on his face, because he obviously realizes that he's kind of bullshitting at this point about his experience with his dad's Kumar. And the way that he kind of reflects on that in the moment, and kind of acts like it's not a big thing in those final 5-10 seconds of the episode, just where it's zooming in on him. I think are really, really good. Really, really good.
We've got the party episode after that as well, where is it Carmela's birthday? Or is it her dad's
it's Carmela's dad's birthday. Yeah. I like the fact that Carmela's dad loves Tony, and that came out of nowhere, and he won't go to his own 75th birthday party unless Tony's the one manning the barbecue. That's pretty funny. You've actually got some good Blundetto content in that episode as well, because he gradually becomes more frustrated with things, doesn't he, over the course of that episode. He talks to Meadow a couple of times. You see him with his kids a little bit as well. And I think there's something boiling inside of him that you're not quite sure what it is. Maybe it's just inconsistency. I mean, that was around the time that he had that kind of episode where it was all falling apart for him, the really bad one. So maybe it was just I don't know.
You've got and then you've got I can't remember what I was going to say. Oh yeah, the episode Cold Cuts, which is a good Tony and Janice one, but also the one where they go up to the farm, which I think is an interesting one in the Blundetto, Tony and then Christopher relationship.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think that's a great one. It's got the Star Wars wife as well.
Yeah. You're not a big fan of Meadows' boyfriend, are you?
I think he's just a bit boring. Is he called Finn?
I think he is called
Finn.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like the episode where he goes to the construction site. I think
really good.
I think that's a good plot line. And,
because I was watching that episode with my dad. I think that was the last one that I actually watched before I came back here and finished the season off with you. And we were watching the episode and everything was going absolutely fine. And then there was a scene where Finn was at the beach with his with Meadow and a couple of their friends, and they were like, "Oh yeah, how's the construction work going?" And he says, "Oh yeah, no, it's okay." And then he says, "Right, I should probably get going." And Meadow says, "But you don't go to work until a couple of hours, sure you can stay longer." And he says, "No, I've got to catch some sleep. I'm gonna get there early as well." And it was on that line, "I'm gonna get there early," that my dad just burst out laughing straight away. And I had no idea, and he turned to me and he said, do you know what's going to happen? And I know that Harry sometimes talks to you about the show, and I said, I've got absolutely no clue. All I know is that I'm meant to like Vito by the end of the show. And he just kind of chuckled away, and the next scene is him going to the construction site, and he looks over and Vito's just sucking the security guy off in the car, and then he acts like he didn't see anything until Vito finds him later on in the day and basically threatens him into going to watch a baseball match with him. It's very funny.
I think he's good because that guy is like, he's so like normal. So in this world, Vito is like the deadliest like mob boss. That he's Phil Leotardo to this guy. Like he's terrible. Really, Vito is like in that construction site amongst those guys. He's not that kind of big or successful. He's just kind of like a generic. I know he killed Jackie Jr.
Yeah.
But I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I almost got lulled into a false sense of security during that episode a little bit as well, because towards the start, you find out that Finn's going to get a job on this construction site, and at that point you basically just go, okay, something really crap is going to happen because this kid he's a nice guy, and then towards the start, he's kind of sitting there. And you see a red car drive out of nowhere onto the construction site, and Phil Leotardo gets out, and you kind of go, oh, fuck, okay. You basically know whenever Phil's in a scene, anything can happen, pretty much.
Yeah.
And Finn's sat maybe 20 meters away, but nothing happens.
The slick back hair, like you said.
Yeah, and nothing happens. And then you get one scene where one of the other guys beats someone up over pretty much nothing, and it affects Finn a little bit. But then you don't get anything for a while, and you think, oh, okay, maybe this will be alright. Until the Vito scene happens, and that's what you've basically been waiting for the entire episode, something to basically go completely sideways. And you get it, and it's really, really funny.
It makes him an interesting character, because now he knows there's this like one thing that no one else knows about, really.
Yeah. Well, does that come back then? Oh, okay, you're not going to tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes Finn a more interesting character, because suddenly if Finn is in the scene with Vito, it's like when Adriana is suddenly in the scene and you know what's going on with Adriana and she's got a secret. You kind of view Adriana in a different way. I think it kind of gives you and Finn know something that other characters don't, so that kind of makes Finn a more interesting character. But he is kind of just bland. Like a lot of scenes of him and Meadow, I'm not the biggest fan of. Maybe I'm remembering season 6.
I think the reason that I like him is only because when I know he's in a scene, and it's just him and Meadow, I know that even if it will be dramatic, even if it would be sad, I know that he's not going to do anything shitty because he's trustworthy, because he's just a nice person, and it's because Finn is surrounded by a cast and collection of characters that whenever I watch on screen, I just kind of go, oh fuck, these two characters in the same room, something really crap is going to happen. But Finn is just this average guy who you barely ever see. Pretty much, but when I know he's on screen, I know I can feel safe for just a scene, pretty much, because he's just not a bad guy at all. Yeah, I think Adriana is just the unluckiest character in TV history. I'm not even joking. She gets such a rough fucking time in season 5. It's insane.
I mean, in the pilot when Adriana was the series regular and was a waitress that shows Christopher and Christopher's Gumar to the table, I feel like that's when she should have broken up with him. When she just saw that he was with someone else because they hadn't cast her yet. I think from episode 1, before she was even the main character, that's when she had her luck out for her.
Yeah. Looking back now, it's almost comical how much crap shit happens to her in one season of the TV show. But while you're watching it, you don't really realise that.
What's going to happen next season? What's season 6?
So, I don't know if Johnny Sachs is now out of the game for good. But if he is, that's great fucking news, because it means that I get more Phil Leotardo content in a position where you can actually make decisions. And I know that's going to have some major repercussions. I literally cannot wait to see what happens with that, because Phil Leotardo is such a great character. I think with me, right, The Sopranos, if you ask me to name my favourite characters in the show, I think they divide quite neatly into 2 sets. So half of my favourite characters are pretty much just the women in the show, because they're not part of the mafia and they're just nice people. So Carmela, Meadow, Jennifer, Aunt Ro, characters like that, basically, and Jackie Jr. as well. Basically, the best characters are the ones that are the most likable, are the ones that are as far away from the centre of the organisation as possible, and that's just kind of incidental. And then on the other side, my other half of the favourite characters in the show are the ones that are just like the worst of the worst. So Phil, I fucking loved Richie so much. Ralph was great. Basically the characters that are going to die at some point. But I think that's pretty funny, because my favourite characters are the ones on one extreme and then the ones on the other extreme. And then all the characters that are kind of in the middle, I feel less significant about. They're just kind of they lead more to Phil and Richie's side, of course, just because they are in organised crime. But I think it's kind of funny that I can sort my favourites out into those two categories, which are like polar opposites when you think about it. But for Series 6, well, I know Chicken Town's coming up. Looking forward to watching that.
That's 6D, I think.
Yeah, I know, it's 6p. I'm looking forward to seeing the final episode because I know that the final scene's set in a diner, I think, and I know Tony's in it, and I know that there's some kind of fundamental question about his mortality in that scene that I can't wait to see how it unfolds, and I don't know anything else about it, which is good. I know there's a wedding episode you told me about, or some kind of big party episode, and the dream episode you told me about. Actually, the episode that I'm really looking forward to watching is the first episode back, because you told me that this nothing character that we've seen about twice in the whole show. He's kind of the main character of it, and I kind of want to see what they do with him.
It's good. It's a really strong start. Sags a little bit towards the end, 6A, but 6B again, just this is banger after banger. So.
Yeah. I really can't wait to see how they ramp the New York, New Jersey shit up as well. Because like I've said many times on this podcast and outside of this podcast, the logical direction for things to go in from the start to the end is New York gradually gets pulled into the fold more and more and more. Because that's just a great way to escalate the tension within the organisation, to have this other massive extremity basically come in and create all other sorts of conflict. And it was a great part of Series 5. The relationship between Little Carmine and Johnny Sacks, and how people get caught up in between it as well. And I really hope that they carry that on in the 6th season, and New York is still as much, if not even more, of an active presence than they were in Season 5, because it's just the logical way to go forward. It would seem like a massive downward spiral if New York took a back seat, basically, more than they did in Series 5. I just hope they ramp that shit up to the extreme, pretty much.
Yeah, you got some good Johnny Sacks and Phil Leotardo stuff coming up.
That's good.
It does. It is good stuff.
Yeah.
All right, should we wrap up then?
Yeah, we should wrap it up.
Okay.
See you later.